All right. Well, so tonight we're really just going to try and wrap up the sermon by doing a high-level overview and then trying to bring it all together so we can be like, tie a bow on it. I've titled this, Be a Wise Person, Hear and Obey Jesus' Words. So, we've talked, and this is bringing it full circle. The beginning of the sermon is identity. Then we move to action. In the middle, it's punctuated by identity again. Move through the barriers, the kingdom barriers, and we're back to identity. And so this is what the text reads to end the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus, the greatest preacher of all time, preaching the greatest sermon of all time, the conclusion better be good. You better tell a story that makes me feel good. And he does. He tells a story. Well, I guess he tells our story. It's an anecdote. Anyone who listens, this is Matthew 7:24-29. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. That's an identity marker. That person is wise. Like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against the house, it won't collapse because it is built. Here, I'll pull up my translation. Because it is built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. And it says, when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, for he taught with real authority, quite unlike their teachers of religious law. So I want to ask you a question that my mentor, Peter Buckland, asked me 15 years ago. 17 years ago. Every Monday, when I came to his house with a handful of other guys at 10 a.m. for coffee and brownies for 2 years, he would ask us one question, not every week, but regularly. And this was it. What kind of man do you want to be? And so I'll extend that to you as well. Yeah, okay. What kind of woman do you want to be? It's an interesting question. Who do you want to be? And I think Jesus ends his sermon with a question in the form of two options. And I think Jesus is asking, hey, welcome. No, hey, it's all good, man. We're just hanging out today. I think Jesus ends his sermon with an invitation to choose who you want to be. And so let me ask that to you tonight. What kind of person do you want to be? It's an interesting question because typically we don't think God's really interested in what we want. He definitely wants to know who we are. But the reason I'm pitching it as a question and as an invitation is because I think it's a real choice. When Jesus says, anyone who listens, he's basically saying, everyone is listening here, but there's a decision to make. And the decision is, do you want to be wise or foolish? Now, obviously, we all want to be wise. But it's still a decision nevertheless. And so I ask want because the truth is I've learned this in parenting, in friendship, in sales, in pretty much everything in life. What people actually want is what they're going to get. If someone wants an affair, they're going to get one. If they want cheap friendship, they'll find cheap friends. If they want cheap beer, they're going to get some cheap beer. Unwisely. Don't look, here's the deal. This is not a Presbyterian church, okay? We don't talk about alcohol. What you want in life is generally what you're going to get. So when I'm on a sales call, my main goal is to find out what they really want. And then I can find out whether I can deliver on that. And Jesus is finding out, okay, look, I've laid out a lot of things. But what do you want? Who do you want to be? Because here's your choices. And I'm telling you how it is. If you want to be wise, you will follow my teaching. If you want to be foolish, you will not follow my teaching. And if you choose to be wise, it's going to go really well for you. If you choose to be foolish, it's going to go pretty bad for you. And here's the crazy part. Everyone knows this. The question is not whether we know about wisdom or what a foolish life is like. We all know that it's stupid to make stupid decisions. I love that he lays out the plain and simple in plain and simple terms. He's like, look, if you follow what I just said, it's like building on a bedrock. It's good stuff. Everyone knows that if you build on sand, it's foolish. It's going to crash. That's just how it is. It's not even you might have some rough times. It might not work out well for you. He's like, it will fall with a mighty crash. Isn't that interesting? It's not some sort of hedging your bets. The question is when will it? It will. And think about the people in your life. So what we're going to do is we're going to take his final words and we're going to go through. We're going to wash again through the words of the Sermon on the Mount in the context of the section as a whole, Matthew 4-9. And we're just going to ask God, what is it that you want of me? How can I obey? And how can I be wise? How can I be wise? We know what it's like. But now, God, how can I be like that? And these words are worth, it's like 10 weeks of the Sermon on the Mount. It's like, yeah, dude, how about a lifetime? How about we spend a lifetime teasing this out? So I laid this out on day one, and I said there was about 12 or 15 people in here. You remember what I said? What did I say?
Most of you won't make it to the end.
We made it.
Congratulations. I was actually, y'all apparently as a group were worse than I thought, because there's only 3 of y'all left.
It's a third.
I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty profound observation. You guys are here because you want to be. The other people, they didn't want it. Now, things could have come up, kids, I'm not saying everyone didn't want the Sermon on the Mount. I'm just saying, what's clear is that you guys were hungry. And that's really cool. It's not easy. The main goal of this class from the beginning has been to not only hear but obey Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. And at the end of our class today, we're going to spend at least 30 minutes in discussion. I want to hear about how that's been. I just want to kind of sit in these words more, though, with you guys tonight before we totally land the plane. I want to enjoy this. The main point of the Sermon on the Mount, so we've got the main goal of the class, but the main point of the Sermon on the Mount is this. Jesus is inviting us into his inside-out, upside-down, centrifugal kingdom life. Moves from the inside out, where we live as whole people for the good of the whole world. I'll say that again. Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, is inviting us into his inside-out, upside-down, centrifugally moving kingdom life, where we get to live as whole people for the good of the whole world. With that lens, let's do a flyover of the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to do something a little interesting here. I'm going to plug in some coordinates. And we're going to just fly through it. So through this program, I can list all these. Let's see, Matthew. Oh, there's 2 T's. There we go. And what I want you to capture is the authority of Jesus' words. Wasn't that an interesting? They were amazed because he spoke as one with great authority. Now, there's different ways you can speak with authority. You can come in here and jump on it. It's like, you guys listen to me! Yeah! You know. I did that for you, Joe. Hopefully you'll see that in the recording. You can be forceful in authority. How did Jesus speak these words? Was he like, you're foolish? You know, was he being dramatic? That's one way to be forceful, right? That's one way to be authoritative. But what do we know about Jesus? He was humble. And he was gentle. He was powerful, right? So I want you to picture some of the things that Jesus says and just try and imagine, what was his posture? What was his tone? How did he say these things? And so if we look at Matthew 4 through 9, we actually see in the very middle of Matthew 4 through 9 the Sermon on the Mount. In other words, his words that he says to live by, his teachings, are part of his words, but there's actually more going on in this section. The whole section has to do with his authority. So it's really interesting. He's in the desert in Matthew 4. He's fasting for 40 days, and after 40 days, it says he's hungry. And Satan comes to him and says, it tempts him with bread. Jesus says in response, no, the scriptures say, people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So the funny thing is that Jesus says, listen to my words, but really his secret is that the Son's words come from the Father, and he had done his job of listening. Even though he had the fullness of the deity in bodily form, he was a disciple, Hebrews tells us. He learned by what he suffered. Jesus knew the power of the Word of God. And then in Matthew 4:17 it says that Jesus began to preach, repent of your sins and turn to God, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Jesus had captured the power of words. His authority carried him through ministry. Jesus traveled, it says, throughout the region of Galilee in Matthew 4:23, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. So Jesus is clearly speaking, but what are the two walking sticks of kingdom life? Talking, and what happens next? It says he healed every kind of disease and illness. Words and actions of wholeness. He's bringing the kingdom, and he's bringing the kingdom with his actions. He's bringing wholeness. It says news about him spread as far as Syria, and people began bringing to him all who were sick, and whatever their sickness or disease, or if they were demon-possessed, epileptic or paralyzed, he healed them all. So in other words, he's healing them inside and out. He's working on their minds, their vitality, which is what we usually call soul, and their bodies. Jesus is bringing wholeness to the whole person. Large crowds followed him wherever he went. People from Galilee, the 10 towns, Jerusalem, from all over Judea, and from the east of the Jordan River. And then out of the context of that ministry of the kingdom life, it says one day as he saw the crowds gathering, he realized he had a platform. Now, let me just say something about platform. There are two ways to get a platform in the world. Self-platforming and natural platforming. When someone platforms themselves, it's ugly. It's just like, does he know? Like, who's going to tell him? You know? And Jesus says, a mighty crash, right? But there's Jesus' way of platforming, which happens to a person. The crowds were gathering. It does not say that Jesus gathered the crowd. It's a very important distinction. Centrifugal kingdom life works from the inside out. We are so obsessed with marketing and sales and platform and audience and all that. And those aren't bad things. But our focus in our personal life, in our family life, and in our church, whatever ministry we have, must not focus on crowd gathering. If we're bringing life, the crowds are going to come. Don't worry about it. Literally, don't worry about it. But if the crowds come and you're not a life-giving minister, but a self-seeking proclaimer, a great crash is coming.
We don't have any of those in America.
But if you kind of read the words of the scripture, there's richness at every phrase. It says Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples gathered around him and he began to teach them. So we learned that the first people who heard him were the disciples, and it grows from there. And he talks about blessed are those who are poor. Again, back to the identity. And then he says, you've heard it was said, but I say to you. And anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it builds on a solid rock. It says, when Jesus finished these things, the crowds were amazed. Okay? Then we get into Matthew 8 and 9. The saga continues. It's really interesting. It says that Jesus reached out to a person who was, let's get a little more context here. Okay, so large crowds followed Jesus, Matthew 8:1, as he came down the mountainside. Okay, so crowds were gathering, then the disciples listened, and now large crowds are there. Suddenly a man with leprosy approached him and knelt before him. Lord, the man said, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. Jesus reached out and touched him. I am willing. Be healed, and instantly the leprosy disappeared. The word willing in Greek is the same word as I want. So another translation that's legitimate is, I want to do that. Lord, if you want, even God gets what he wants. Be healed. And he spoke, and he was healed. Now, he touched him, but he also spoke. Jesus was a man who moved, and that's interesting that coming out of the Sermon on the Mount, because right before it says he preached the kingdom and he healed. The first thing he does out of the Sermon on the Mount is he attaches word and action together in a moment of healing. Be healed, and instantly the leprosy disappeared. And then he says, don't tell anyone about this, but go to the priest, let him examine you. That's the opposite of the way our world works. He's actually trying to keep the crowd down. What a humble man. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed. He's trying to cross his T's and dot his I's for the greatest impact. When something good happens to us, what do? Do we double down on doing it right, or do we get sloppy and into ourselves? The next verse, let's get a little more context here. 8:7. What happens in Matthew 8:7? So an officer comes to Jesus and says, my servant is not well, and Jesus says, I will come and heal him. But the officer said, Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come in my house. And then catch this, he says, just say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. So if we're thinking about the power of Jesus' word, it's on full display after the Sermon on the Mount as well. It says, then Jesus said to the Roman officer, go back home. Because you believed, it has happened. And the young servant was healed that same hour. The power of Jesus' word didn't just have the power to convict or to correct or even to command people in the Sermon on the Mount. It had power somehow in the cosmos to travel through space and heal a man, a servant, without going there. Now that is powerful. And I think Matthew is doing something really particular here with the way he tells the story. He says, then Jesus got into the boat and started across the lake with his disciples. Suddenly a fierce storm, this is all in Matthew 8 still, a fierce storm struck the lake, with waves breaking into the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, shouting, Lord, save us! We're going to drown! You know, that's how I imagine. Jesus is like, God, I was in REM. Okay. Jesus responded, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. And then, catch this, he got up and he rebuked with his words the wind and the waves. And suddenly there was a great calm. So if we're tracking with this, Jesus has the ability to heal a servant who's about to die, to heal skin that has leprosy, and to bring order and peace to the wind and the waves. And then in Matthew 8, still again, there was, I think it was the Gerasene demoniac. And Jesus says, all right, go. And he commands the demons to come out of the men and entered so there was 2 men in Matthew's retelling of this. And they entered the pigs. And the whole herd plunges down. So far what we've seen is Jesus commands the body, Jesus commands the sky, and Jesus commands the spiritual realm with his word. All right, he commands the demons to go. Jesus is now saying, yeah, I do have authority, and I actually have cosmic authority. Not just in the things you can see, but even in the dimension of the heavens that you can't see. Then it says, Jesus went back across the lake. Some people brought him a paralyzed man. Seeing their faith, Jesus said to the paralyzed man, be encouraged, my child, your sins are forgiven. Now he has positive power through his words in the spiritual realm to forgive sin. It's not just to command the enemy out, but to bring wholeness.
Right there where he says, this is a paralyzed man, but then he said, your sins are forgiven. Right? So it's different from what he said before, you're healed.
Yeah.
Why does he change that up, do you think?
Well, there's another place, and it may be here, where they actually challenge him on that.
I remember that.
And this is my translation of it. What's the difference?
Right.
He's bringing, you're picking up on something important. He's bringing wholeness. And
I think he's trying to illustrate it, though, because he said it differently. Right?
what's the story that you're saying? Or the leprosy one?
Maybe just any of them before.
Yeah.
He said, you know.
Yeah, he's doing it differently.
Be healed. Right?
Yeah, so he said, be healed. And then this time he doesn't even talk about the healing. Here, let's give us a little more context.
Man, your sins are forgiven.
It says, that's blasphemy. Does he think he's God?
But then he does, like, in the scriptures down, right? Doesn't he? Then he heals the guy, like right after this. Like he says, because they question him about does he have authority to forgive sin? But then he maybe I'm wrong. I felt like it was like then
I
he
think that is where he does.
turns around and heals it.
So this is the next word. Jesus knew what they were thinking, so he asked them, why do you have such evil thoughts in your hearts? The man jumped up and went home. His healing, so it's a different story where they challenge that particular notion, but the same thing is evident here. He's not avoiding the paralyzed nature of this man. He is healing the whole man. And if he had just said you're healed physically, that's one thing, but your sins are forgiven, it's possible that this man was paralyzed because of sin. We don't know. Whatever the case was, Jesus was aiming for a particular instance of grace that only he knew needed to be done. And he's also, it's almost like tying the bow on it, because at the beginning, right when he comes down, What was the first thing he says out of when he comes out of the Sermon on the Mount? If you're willing, be clean. And he says, be healed. And he touched him. Okay? So there's this physical, verbal dynamic going on. There's this external, internal dynamic. There's the wind and the waves, and the people of little faith. And I think Jesus is turning the diamond for people to see the authority of his word and the authority of his person, to see it in the multi-refracting nature of a beautiful diamond, so that we can see the power of God in him. And so elsewhere he says, either way, the guy's getting healed. Okay? So then we come back down, and then it keeps going. As Jesus walked along, there was a man named Matthew, and he says, come, follow me. So he commands obedience. And then it says in Matthew 9:22, Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, daughter, be encouraged, your faith has made you well. Get out, he told them. The girl isn't dead, she's asleep. And then Jesus, he touched their eyes and said, because of your faith, it will happen. And their eyes were open and they could see. Jesus sternly warned them, don't tell anyone. All of this culminates in Matthew 9:35. It says, Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And it says, and it's like, wait, didn't he already say this? This is not Matthew 4. We read something just like this. There's there's an inclusio in literature that begins and ends with the same thing. And he says, and he healed every disease and illness. He preached and he healed. If we want to be men and women of the kingdom, we are going to preach and we are going to heal. We are going to bring with us the power of the word and the power of action. And that's actually what Jesus invites us into in Matthew chapter 7:24. He says, anyone who listens to my teaching and talks about it a lot is smart. No. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. The talking comes as we're walking, but it's the walking it out that is wise. There's a lot of teachers out there. There's a lot of people that flap their gums, you know what I'm saying? But what Jesus brings it full circle to say is, okay, and then it's rinse and repeat. Follow, and then, okay, let's go back to the beginning. Now let's follow, and then let's listen again and follow, and then maybe one day we'll be a teacher. But that's not the point. He doesn't say anything about teaching. Don't worry about teaching. So that is the context in which we get the Sermon on the Mount. So let's go through the Sermon on the Mount again. This is kind of summing it all up. And we're not going to read the whole thing line by line, but let's kind of marinate in it in view of this higher level summary. Let me see if, it says, God blesses those who are poor and realize their need for him, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. The beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. God blesses those who mourn, those who are humble, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness or justice. God blesses those who are merciful, pure in heart. These are all characteristics of people, you don't get on American Idol because you've got a pure heart. You know what I mean? Workers of peace, that's a very modern invention. It's more like, Alexander the Great, did you conquer another nation or not? Okay? Persecution is not a badge of honor for almost anyone in history. But in the kingdom of heaven that belongs to Jesus, these are the people invited in at the table. When Jesus was forming his holy council of disciples, he handpicked people based on being lowly and who he could make them to be. And those are the blessed people. Be happy, he says in verse 12. Be very glad, for great a great reward awaits you in heaven. It sounds crazy when he says it, but it's true. There's a big difference between like being satisfied. Because, like, okay, think about a Big Mac at McDonald's, right? It's like, it tastes real. I had a burger today from Steak and Shake. Now, I wrapped it half with lettuce, right? Because I know that if I just eat a whole burger and like a thing of French fries and maybe I wash it down with the milk, like, I'm done. I'm like catatonic in about an hour. And somehow, even if I don't do that, Sunday afternoons, I'm still catatonic, no matter what I eat. Tuna salad. But we know what happens when we're eating that thing. It's like, man, that milkshake's amazing. It's like, where did the 16-ounce milkshake go? It's like, you're donezo, man. But you're not satisfied. Not really. You're momentarily delighted. What Jesus offers is true happiness. And he's not, I mean, this sounds like it sounds kind of facetious. Great rewards await you, but it's legitimate. When you live the kingdom life, you're living in a different realm, and it's totally different. That's why we don't have to lie, cheat, steal, commit adultery, backstab. Yeah. We don't have to do that stuff to get that rise. There's a reason people sin. It's because it's fun. It works. But it doesn't work. You're different. You're the salt of the earth. You help make things and keep them good. The primary role of salt. You're the light of the world. Who you are has a great destiny to it if you stick with me. I remember when I went to Bible college, I joined a ministry like my freshman year at College Heights Christian Church. And Josh Quaddy was the college minister there. It was a mega church, probably 2,000 people. And there was probably 70 people in this college ministry. And I was a part of it for 2 years. I remember Josh Quaddy and I really connected. He was a good mentor and a good friend. He was only 25. I was like 18. But I felt like he was a sage, you know. He was so cool, man. And he took me out one day after I'd been around a while, and he said, man, if you'll stick around with me for 4 years, you know, he wasn't like manipulating me at all, but he was like, man, we could do some really cool stuff. And I'm convinced that a lot of Christians just need to stick around longer until it gets good. I ended up going to Cyprus overseas for 9 months in the middle of college, kind of threw things off, so I didn't stick around for 4 years. But I'm telling you, now that I've been at Harpeth for 10 years, after having graduated seminary, 10, almost 11, things are sweet. Like, my friendship with Colin Matthews is tight, you know, and watching him go from the baptistry over here 10 years ago, and I didn't baptize him, by the way. He got baptized before I met him. But I've walked with him. We used to meet every Monday night, and we'd do, just like Peter Buckland did brownies and coffee, we did Betty Crocker oatmeal chocolate chip cookies every Monday night. Now, I could only have, I didn't want to go catatonic at night, but Colin and I have walked together for a long time. I did baptize Cody when he was 19. He's 27 now. He's got 2 kids. He's taught you guys the last 2 weeks. It's sweet. There's satisfaction, and then there's gratification. There's a big difference. And Jesus is offering that deep peace. Don't misunderstand why I've come. Look, all this stuff that God's been doing for the last couple millennia, it's like, I'm not erasing that. It's good. I just want to give you fullness. I want to warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees, you will never go to heaven in the clouds when you die. No. You will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I'm convinced that the best way to understand that is you will never enter on a regular basis, let alone once, that kingdom life in that other dimension that's all around us at hand. In other words, there's no fighting chance for you if you're going to remain hypocritical and surface level for you to feel the reign of God pulsing through your veins. You've got to be holistic here. Look, you've heard it said, don't murder, but don't be angry. You know what that does on the inside? This is Chad's paraphrase. That's gonna ruin you. He's thinking about you. He's speaking the voice of a loving father. And he says, like, don't ruin your life with anger. Like, yeah, killing is bad, of course. But there's more things that are wrong with anger than that. Look, adultery is one thing, but you know how to ruin your thought life? It's to look at porn regularly. Don't even look at a woman lustfully. Like, it's not good for you. You're meant for so much more. And look, divorce is not the answer, because that's just going to lead to more adultery. You've heard that it was said, don't break your vow, but look, just be really simple. Say yes or no. Don't say, that should work. Be the kind of person when you speak, you have authority. He's leading by example here. Look, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's the way the world works. That was God condescending to your level for a period of time, but there's more to it than that. Like, that makes sense when you're in a UFC fighting ring, right? But look, that's not the end-all, be-all. That's a certain way of life, but I want to give you full life. You know what real life looks like? It looks totally different. Upside down, backwards, inside out. Love your neighbor. And pray for those who persecute you. Love your enemies. There's nothing more radical than that, even today. That will never not be radical. It will always be, that's weird. I always hear about these cases in the court of law where someone killed someone's, like a child, and the parent forgives them in court. I don't even want to watch that. That's so unbelievably gracious and merciful. If I watch it, I'll be like, I don't know God, like, because I don't think I could do that. But God says, I want to invite you into that. I want to teach you how to do that. It's like, but what about, I want to lead you. Watch out. Like, okay, let's talk about what you can do. I want you guys to be generous, but like, don't be duplicitous when you give. Don't do it for the show. And when you pray, look, just let's play it simple. Don't let anyone know you're praying. Be so powerful in the kingdom that it's a secret. Create a room. Shut the door. Now, is Jesus being literal there? Why not? You can totally pray in public, but he's like, look, let me teach you how to do this. Focus on this kind of secret life. And when you pray about the kingdom, man. Start with the kingdom. But just know that God's going to meet you at every level. And don't be hypocritical. Don't ask for God's forgiveness when you're not. I want to bring wholeness of life to you. Same thing. When you're fasting, just be austere in your spirit. And, if you have to lean one way or another, look, put some makeup on. Like, put some extra cologne on. Don't be incongruous with who you are in the inside and the outside. God's going to reward you. And don't spend your time focusing on the worldly treasures. God's going to take care of those. Be pure. When your eye is whole, your whole body is going to be healthy and full of light. Because you're meant to be light, and if what is meant for light is dark, it feels so much darker because you're supposed to be a light on a hill. So don't be divided. I want you to be whole. Don't be duplicitous. Put God at the center and at the top above everything else. You don't have to worry about your everyday life, your clothes, your son getting stitches next door. He's got you. Now this one's really interesting to me because there's challenging moments for me as a business owner. Kevin, I know you're with Churchill. You guys seem to be doing well. There's probably stories of when it's been tough. I don't know. But for me as an entrepreneur, I'm like, man, sometimes like I don't know how this is going to work out. Does that happen sometimes?
We have had many challenges.
Okay. And it's like it's vulnerable. And it's like, don't worry, but who's going to take care of the bottom line, the top, whatever. But every time, God takes care of our needs. Now, does he take care of more than our needs? Not always. This year has been a challenging year. I've had to dip into savings in unexpected ways. But you know what? When you have a track record with God, or he has a track record with you, that moment where you're like, oh, doesn't last as long. It's okay to be like, what? $8,000 for the ER when Josh was 10 days old. He had COVID, and that bill was $8,000. We had just paid $5,000 for his birth. And it was like, now some family helped us out and stuff, but like it was, I mean, he went in the kids' ambulance. It was like, but time after time after time, if we're humble, if we'll obey Jesus, the kind of life we have is on the bedrock. We don't even have to worry about the floods. Because he says, seek first the kingdom. What's the Sermon on the Mount about? The kingdom. The kingdom life, man. And he says, seek it above all else, live righteously, and you're good, man. Like literally, don't worry about tomorrow. Just focus on the kingdom today, being faithful. Look, you're going to be tempted to struggle with judging other people. You're going to be tempted to, be lazy and not really seek after things. You're going to be tempted to seek your own way and to go the broad way. But I tell you what, don't associate with the false prophets. Stick to true discipleship. Be whole. Be true. Don't put on the show. And anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise. Like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in torrents and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching, anyone who experiences revelation and wants transformation but doesn't choose to obey, this is just how it is. It's like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and the floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. Choices before you. I'll ask the same question. Afresh today, who do you want to be? Not what do you want to do, who do you want to be? Those storms in Texas that wiped out the Camp Majestic and took girls, I think it was a girls' camp that week. I mean, there was I think it was over 100 people that died. I mean, the flood of 100-year flood kind of thing. I think it was even worse. It was crazy. You never expect the tragedy. That's why it's called a tragedy. You never expect the cancer diagnosis. When we found out our daughter in utero had trisomy 18, it blindsided us. You never see the death of a loved one. Well, you often don't. You never really expect that someone in your family will have a moral failure. It's because God gives us a choice. That's one of the most interesting things about God. And we see it in Jesus. He lays it out clearly, and he says, who do you want to be? It's like, why can't you tell me the answer and I do it? And he's like, I did. But God doesn't do our part. He says, look, here's my part, and you have to accept the invitation. Obedience is the way. So here's a question. How do you know if you're the one that Jesus is talking about who is wise? Like, how do you know that you've made that decision? Is it a one-time thing? Like, how much of your life needs to be surrendered? How do you know if you're the kind of person who's building on the bedrock or not? Like, because I know I sin, and I know you sin. So, like, seems like it's black and white, and I'm not sure if my record is that white, you know? So here's the bottom line answer. You'll know when the storms come. And we all will. Remember we talked about ethics? We talked about this the day that I had to take Josh to the ER. There's things that work. There's things you're supposed to do because you're commanded. So there's results ethics, there's command ethics, and there's virtue ethics. Here's the problem with the way the world works. It works until it doesn't work, and it's too late. You do the right thing because you're told to, well, you're a hypocrite because you didn't want to do it. You didn't actually sign up for that. Virtue is you do it because it's right and it's because what you want. Who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? It will be revealed, your decision. It simply will be. When your spouse leaves you, you will be revealed for who you are. When the cancer diagnosis comes, you'll see what kind of person you've become. When the waves and the wind come, we'll find out what your house is built on. That's how you know. So my recommendation is to don't make decisions because they work or just because you're told to. But if you live the kingdom life, when it doesn't make financial sense, when you love the enemy, it doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. When you do it because it's right, I'm like pretending I've written it on the board. When you do it because it's right, you can know that when that day comes, your house is built on the rock. Because you've built it on the Word of God. So I wanna kind of end on this. When I was in college, I took a class on, they call it the pastoral epistles. That's 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. And the newly elected president of Ozark Christian College was Matt Proctor. And he loved teaching the pastoral epistles. So I got to take that class with him, and it was awesome. He was just a little younger than I am now. He was 35 when he became the president, so he was probably like 37 when he was teaching that class. And he was just as bald as I am. I don't know how that happened so fast. He said something, I remember it really well. I don't even know what passage it was. It was probably finish the race with perseverance marked out for you. That's Hebrews, but he says, finish the good fight of faith in the pastoral epistles. That's what Paul says to little Timothy. Timothy was probably a young man, maybe in his 20s or 30s. And Paul says, finish. And then Matt Proctor said this. He said, look around you right now. My professor told this to me, and I'm going to pass it along to you. 1 in 10 of you will stick it out in ministry for the long haul. 1 in 10. And I thought, 10%? Yeah, right, dude. We're all Bible majors. Like, do you know your audience here? We're all going into ministry. Yep, about 10% is right. Atheist, universalist, ministry dropout, moral failure, divorce, one after the other. Odds are against us. Narrow is the path that leads to life. He doesn't say narrow is the path that leads to heaven. Narrow is the path that leads to life, Jesus says. And few find it. The odds are against you. 1/3 of Christians finish well. Bobby Clinton did research. This is years ago now. I think it was about 20 years ago, but Bobby Clinton was doing some academic work, but kind of like on a ministry side. And he looked at 1,500 people for his data set, and he asked the question, what does it take to finish well? And he looked at Old Testament and New Testament and then church history. That's where he got his data from. So it's people that we know what the end of their life was like. And his research revealed that only 1/3 of people in the faith finish their life well. They don't die young for whatever reason. They don't have a moral failure. They don't like blow up their church or their country. You know, if you think about the kings of Israel, they finish well. Only 1/3. Who do you want to be? When I went to the mission field at the age of 20, my roommate had a moral failure. He actually sexually abused a missionary's daughter for a period of 3 months. Blew up our mission. That was a tragedy. No one saw it coming, and the men on the team were looking. I was devastated. Who do you want to be? Marriages of people I know. I thought people only got divorced when they were old. And then come to find out, no, your friends get divorced. I've been shocked by the people in my life. I mean, I now know why. Marriage is hard, right? It's not easy. But man, marriages falter. Who are you going to be? I thought only other people lost children. And then Catherine died the day she was born. I know people who have experienced miscarriages. They say that within 5 years after you lose a child, I don't remember the exact statistic, but a lot of people end up divorced within 5 years of losing a child. It was not easy dealing with my own grief, let alone Rachel's grief. It lasted years, and it's not like, that was a sad event. It's like, what is life? You know what I mean? Who do you want to be? Do you want to be wise or foolish? And we can know your choice by what you do. The crowds were amazed. Wow, like that was great. I love that TED Talk. That was really nice. Can we hear more of that? That's different. So that's our temptation. We could be like, man, that was a really good Sermon on the Mount summer series, you know. Man, the way Chad talked about it was really cool. I really connected with that. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? It's an invitation. I just want to encourage you to finish well, and you know how to do that? It's to walk in such a way as to win the prize. Pace yourself. Be humble. But mostly obey. It's really simple. If you're like, man, other people need to pray in secret. I'm good, though. I can pray publicly. I'm good. It's fine. I'm telling LinkedIn that I gave a donation because that's kind of my position in the company. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's part of what we do. I'm good. I mean, I know Jesus says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, but I'm going to let everybody know anyway. Because it's me. I'm pretty humble. Like, I'm not really I'm bragging about what we did. I'm good, though. I don't really need Jesus' words, is what you're saying. It's tricky, man. Who do you want to be? 1 1/3 finish well, because the path is narrow. So I just want to encourage you guys to live a secret life of the kingdom. I love in the Dr. Seuss book, oh, the places you'll go, he says basically, oh man, I should memorize this, but he's like, lonely is a place that you'll find yourself a lot. It's one of the places you'll go, and it's a place you'll go a lot when you're a disciple of Jesus. I got comfortable with it when I was in high school. So that's one of your things. It's par for the course, man. But we're not alone. I love it when Jesus says, this is the night before he dies. He says, you're all going to leave me alone. Like, you're all going to leave me, and I'll be alone. And then he smiles, and he says, but I'm not alone, for the Father is with me. Love that. I love that. That's the secret of the kingdom life. Joseph knew it when he was in the dungeons of Egypt. Jesus knew it when he was in the grips of Golgotha. And every saint in history who has finished well has known it deeply because they have a secret hidden life in this crazy, upside down, backwards, inside out, centrifugal kingdom life where we get to be just us in God. And it's for the good of the whole world. That's the Sermon on the Mount, man. That's the Sermon on the Mount. Well, let's just kind of circle around and finish out with, we can mix Q&A with a little discussion. I'm going to pull up some of my questions here.